so here we go. So tonight we're going to be looking at some interlocking spirals. I've just got an A3 piece of paper here. So for this one, I just think choose two colours that are quite, that are they're going to stand out from each other. Nothing that's going to merge in, because we're going to start with a big sweep of sort of spirally paint kind of coming in this way, and then we're going to sort of work around it. Again, don't worry if you get drops of water, and things dribbling down, because that's where we get our exciting moments, unexpected moments, when we sort of have explosions of paint interacting with each other. So I'm just going to start with, I think I'm going to start with a general kind of wetting of the surface. If you don't have a spray, then obviously just use a big brush to begin with. I will use a big brush. I have got a spray, but I'm going to use a big brush. So I'm getting tangled up with all my various bits of leads and equipment. So I'm just going to start with a fairly wet surface. Doesn't have to be saturated, but just dampen it down a bit. So I'm going to start with some water just over the whole thing, and then I'm going to use the brush and I'm going to start sweeping it round in a sort of spiral. You can come out from the middle, you can go into the middle. It depends on how you like to build your spirals, and we'll just see if that wet direction in the water kind of gives us any sort of direction, or whether it will just be completely random. So we've got that nice sort of wet surface there. So I'm going to start with my outside colour, and I'm going to use my warmer colour. I'm going to use an orangey tone on the outside, because I think I've said before how cool colours tend to act like shadow. They tend to become what we call recessive. They sort of disappear backwards, and the bright colours tend to come forward. So we're kind of wanting to create a sort of a feeling of sort of dropping into the image. So we're going to start with orange. I'm going to start from the inside, I think, and come out. So just bring a spiral out like that. And the spirals are just such a, let me just turn the light so it's catching a bit on the surface. That's it, we're getting a bit too much shine. Spirals are such strange and fundamental shapes in nature. They're really fascinating things. They're at the heart of so many things. I'm just going to bring that a bit thicker. My aim is to get kind of the outside of my paper mostly orangey. So I've got a bit of extra red coming in there. So where I'm going up to sides, I'm going to take that all completely orange. I'm going to taper it down into the middle. So this corner here will probably be the contrasting blue colours. And then just to bring that round, and I think, yeah, just take all of that in. I don't know that painting the water in a spiral did a massive amount, but we have to try these things, otherwise we don't know what they're going to do. So I've got this nice sort of soft edge kind of up here. I'm going to bring some more, now that I've got my sort of spiral worked out, and of course it's overlapping part of the masking tape, so like this edge here is going to almost disappear when I take the masking tape off eventually. So I'm going to add some more stronger cuts, some warm colours into that spiral, and just bring some of that different sort of shades of heat into that centre. Let's just make that centre a bit stronger. There we go. Let's give them that a real twist kind of round. And there's already this sort of, spirals always have this effect of kind of creating movement and motion through your image. They're sort of, they've got a really strong, powerful movement. And if you're thinking about generally sort of painting or composing images, if you can create a spiral where your chief kind of viewpoint is at the centre of the spiral, even if you just have sort of a range of colours in a background that you realise link together to kind of form a spiral, it's a really powerful composition tool, which is quite an interesting thing to think about. Right, so I've got my lovely sort of red spiral kind of going in here. Now I want to get some different colour, some contrasting colour in the sort of the white space that we've left behind. So I'm just going to get a different brush so that I know it's clean. My headphones are all caught up tonight, so I'm having to unravel myself to get to reach my paintbrush, which I know I should have moved closer before I started, but you know the way you don't do those things, because they're in the room, so obviously it must be okay. So I'm going to use some blue tones to create the inside section of my painting. It's still wet. I'm not going to put extra water in at the moment. I might decide to do that later, but let's just think of our contrasting colour that's coming in here. So this should hopefully be the cooler colour of the ones that you're working with. And I'm just going to start with the brush into that centre and kind of turning it round, bringing it round, coming up to that edge, and we'll see if we're going to get some more we might get some fuzzing going on. We might sort of soften that borderline in a bit, but we'll see. We're going to get some drips and things, I think, moving around. There you go. There's one making a break already. So I'm going to take my blue tones into this spiral shape, just feeling the movement of these two. Is it one spiral? Is it two spirals? Is it one, or sort of one whirl or two? Well, whatever they're doing, they're working in opposition to each other and sort of curling round each other. So I'm going to build up. And again, we want to take some different blues into this, so we're getting some different layers of colour. And we're very similar colours, so blues, greens, tonal colours, moving into this spiral pattern and just finding our paint coming round. Taking that round. And so we've got some nice moments here where that's just starting to blend together. And I want to think about maybe some purple tones into that blue, just to sort of get a bit of difference in, coming round, just to see if we can get some other shades happening. We've got some white up here. I want to kind of get rid of that. I don't want there to be any background white. And oh, don't forget up here, of course, there's that little triangle of where the spiral is kind of coming round through that. So let's take that away as well. Let's get that into blue. And we can just follow the brush round. I've got a lovely sort of sweep of dark paint running around there, some beautiful shapes happening in there, so I don't want to disturb that too much at the moment. And I want to bring a bit more, mine's quite faint here, so I think I want to just strengthen that moment across there where they meet. I've got and it's quite nice to use, where I've got this sort of warmer orangey colour, I'm just sort of using some purple into that edge, and it kind of helps act as a bit of a slight transition colour kind of coming through. And just to sort of like bring that through. And I'd like to get some, maybe now that I'm starting this, maybe I'm thinking I do want to kind of break up some of these edges so they're not too stark. So again, I'm just taking a little bit of purple into here, and then I'm going to get my orange paint back again. And this area here has got slightly drier, so it's sort of firmed up a bit, I guess. So I'm going to go back to my orange brush. I'm going to maybe get some deeper tones. This is really nice. I love the way you get, when you do these opposite colours, you get these moments where these kind of like break one into the other, and you get this lovely kind of almost like aurora kind of coming through. So let's get a bit of, I'm going to add a bit more red into the swirl, the sort of orangey spiral that I've got going on here. I'm using the side of my brush just to get that to be quite like a sort of line. And if that feels too liney, I can use a wet brush on that and just fade it down a bit. I've got a nice bit here. Look, this blue is kind of snuck, I can't get the word out, has sneaked across. That's it, sneaked. And I don't want to lose that. I don't mind that happening, because I think it's got quite a nice sort of feel to it. Again, I'm just going to tilt my light again, because I think just taking it away from the picture, it's difficult, because when it's wet it does pick up the reflection of the light, so it kind of wipes it out a bit. But I want to get some darker red into this top corner. Let me just tilt my camera fractionally. There we go. I'm going to get some darker red tones up into this edge, in this top corner here, because I think it'd be quite nice to use some white pen into this as well as using the coloured pens, just to get some different sort of surfaces going. So let's get some more red into that, and maybe even go into my burgundy sort of wine red up in that corner, just to get some dark into it. I think it will show up better when it's drier for you. And I've got this, there's a white corner lurking down here. Look, there's lovely shapes happening around here. I don't know what we're going to do with them, but there's something really nice happening there. So I think this bottom corner down on the bottom right, that needs some more happening, doesn't it? So I'm going to get some red and orange and block that in. So just so I've got some darker tone coming in there. It's a bit patchy, so I'm going to come back with my wet brush and draw, just soften that with the water so that it's a bit more misty. And again, round here, I think that needs some sort of softening through there. Okay, so I'm quite liking this. Now, this is the point where I'm liking all this, and then I think, do I need to disrupt it? Because sometimes you need to, you know, throw yourself a complete curve and ball and just see what comes of it. So what I may do, I think what I'm going to do is going to dry this off now, and then I'm going to try maybe putting a few more spirals with different kind of loci or sort of starting points, maybe pull another couple in and see where that kind of gets us. So again, I'm going to mute and have a quick dry for a minute, and then I'm going to try just popping in a couple of maybe more slender ones and see how that grabs us. Right, so let me just mute and grab my hairdryer. Right, so I've just dried that off now, and I'm thinking what I want to do is kind of, we're going to put a spiral kind of coming in here, a little bit like the way when you draw around a shape, it kind of gives it more definition. I kind of want to bring some sort of spiral kind of effects on top of this one and see how it sort of divides up the space that we've created. So I'm going to swap to a round brush. So that's obviously one with an end like that. And I'm just going to mix myself up. Colour-wise, I'm going to go for that sort of magenta-y kind of pink colour. So what would be quite good is if you choose some of the outside colour, but choose one of the stronger, perhaps slightly darker ones you might have gone for, so that you've got something that's going to be able to stand up to. It doesn't have to be totally visible, does it? Well, let's see what happens. Let's just see what happens when we... So I'm going to put that spiral in. So I'm going to start it kind of maybe around about here. So it's like linking in, and just swing the hand out so it just becomes a kind of bigger spiral like that. And then straight away, if you think, oh, I'm not sure, I want to soften it a bit, so come back in with some water and I'm just adding a bit more blue paint into that as well. Mainly because the brush was probably a bit dirty, the one that I picked up. But then I can just come with that and just sweep the water over the top, and that starts to blend the colour in a bit more. So it's there, but it's quite ghostly. It's not too strong, but it's just starting to bring sort of like that sort of like combination. And I think now that I've got two, I'm thinking I definitely want to get a third one in. I'm just going to take this wet edge a little bit further out because I'm kind of feeling, and what's going to happen hopefully is when we cross these sort of wet areas that we've created with this time round, it's also going to run, it's going to spread differently when it hits those areas. So let's see what happens with that. So again, I'm going to use magenta-y kind of red again, maybe add a little bit more purple at this time so it's somewhere between the sort of two colours. So I've got somewhere around here. I'm going to just start and just swing another spiral kind of coming out. Yeah, so that's kind of just again pulling that, and I can just want to take that spiral a bit stronger there where it's come through and just across that blue section, and then I'm going to soften it again with water. So I don't want it to be too stripy or hard. I still want it to be quite soft and kind of blended in. So let's again work over that top just with a wet brush, just sweeping it over. If you've got a spray bottle, you might want to try squirting it at this point, seeing, you know, what that runs. But it's just hopefully, oh, I'm tempted just to leave that middle bit just fractionally stronger. So I definitely want, I've got this sort of quite dark stripe up here. I want to blend that in. I don't want that to be too definite. So I'm just going to use some water to kind of work round over that. Okay, so we're hopefully getting this sense of lots of spirals kind of building up, and then maybe we need to have something up here. I don't know, maybe I think something here. You might have another area that you feel needs a spiral, because this is going to be on quite an orangey bit. I'm going to go for a bluey spiral here. So I'm going to get my turquoise and just put a little spiral, and it can be quite a big one. And if you just keep your arms swinging, even if you don't have to actually paint your work surface, but just kind of get it so that it's kind of like really big and it's expansive kind of. So, and we're starting to get this kind of quite nice perspective feel of these sort of like dropping in and out, almost like as if they're describing circular things. I've got a lovely fuzzy kind of a bit happening on here. So I'm not going to interfere with that bit too much. I might interfere with some of the rest of it. Maybe just again, soften that round so it's not too strong. And where it's quite thin, I'm quite happy with it being quite thin, but where it's a bit thicker here, just maybe just adding some water just to kind of soften that. And I've got some nice trails and things coming down. So I think that's looking quite good. I'm just going to soften that one because I want to sort of just decide if you want it to, where you want it to disappear, and you can kind of like blend it in. Oh look, that curl I had at the front, that's kind of run down there and it's kind of lost itself a bit. So I might just flick that in again, so it's kind of doing its thing just through there. And while we've got the paint, I think maybe a few circles might be in order. When I say circles, I mean dots, really, just dabs of the brush, but I'm thinking following some of those spirals round. I don't want to make it too spotty, but I want to put the dot on, and then if it's too spotty, just spread it out with a bit of water so it's more of a kind of shape. Maybe not so keen on that. Maybe I'll just sweep those around. That's a good thing about this when it's wet. If a bit doesn't perfectly work out, you can kind of just turn it into another echo. Yeah, I prefer that. I think we may do some spots in white when it's dry. I think that's what we're going to do, because I didn't like those painted ones as much. Yeah, so we can just flick that around, turn them into another sort of like ghost spiral in between. Ghost Spiral, that sounds like the name of a goth band from about 1992 or something. I'm sure I went to see Ghost Spiral somewhere in Camden Town, I imagine. And yeah, I've got some really nice moments here where these are all kind of coalescing and coming together. So just maybe adding a little bit of detail just where I want to get some of these curls. And that's pretty much going to be us done with the paint on this one. Yeah, so let's dry that last bit off, and then we'll have an explore with the pens and see where they take us. I think I should be using probably some blue and some pink and purple, those kind of colours, whichever colours you want. Again, the closer to your background colours, the more harmonious you get, but if you want a bit more drama, you might need to reach for the black pens. And I think if you've got your white pen, I think there'll be a bit of white pen in this one, because I think it will work really nicely against some of these backgrounds. So again, I'm going to just mute and grab my hairdryer, and I'll be back with you in a minute. Okay, right, so here we are back again. I've got some fantastic sort of lovely watery shady bits here. I've got some lovely sort of bits dissolving together, and some of these I really don't, some of them I'm going to work on, some of them I kind of want to leave because I love this contrast between the kind of mistiness and the sort of the stronger structures. So I think the first bits I'm going to think about with this one is I'm going to look for where I've got quite definite lines and edges, and I'm going to start by just kind of identifying those, because I quite like this sense of this fading in and out kind of feeling that we've got, that there's sort of like sharp bits and there's sort of cloudy bits, and that sort of pattern. I have to remember this is on my drawing board and not to get carried away and draw this in, because that's going to disappear. So I'm just going to look. The obvious place to start is this lovely central quite strong spiral that I've got here. So I'm just using a purple pen, and I'm going to outline around the tip where it's sort of strong. I'm not going to kind of go through that misty bit. I'm going to leave that alone at the moment. I'm going to decide what to do with that later. But where it's a nice strong line, I'm going to come round and make that stronger with the pen line so that it's got more, just more strength. Obviously, that's why I'm making it stronger. It's got more presence. I think that's a better word. So that kind of comes around. So that's the first thing I'm going to look for. I'm going to start going around and looking for, so like I've got this edge here, I've got a nice sharp edge on that side, so I'm going to claim that edge in like that, but I'm going to leave this bit where it's soft for the moment. Then I can got some blue ones here, so this is what you'll be looking for to begin with, at these moments where you get maybe a harder kind of brush line, because we're going to sort of add to the impact by adding those in. This one's quite strong, so I'm gonna count that on Team Strong and add that in, and just sort of bring that round until it hits that sort of cloud zone up here. I've got a little sort of tiny bit of firm there, so let's draw that in, because that's quite, you know, it's quite sort of strong. It's starting to link all these together, and you'll find that when you're doing a piece like this, if you use a similar line or a similar approach to different areas, it starts to visually kind of link them together. I've got a little bit up here, so I'm going to extend that, and I'm just going to use my pen just to extend that mark a little bit. It's quite strong and bold coming across that orange section, and then I'm going to come back down to where this blue is here and just get that little edge in before it hits that sort of point through there. Then I've got quite a straight dribble line down here, so I'm going to just take that one, I think, in. I don't know if I'm going to join them up later, we'll see. how things progress and where we go with them. And then I've got, there's quite a strong orange kind of line here, but I'm going to swap to a different colour pen, so a red or a pink pen like that. So it's doing the same thing, but I just want to look where I've got this sort of, let's see how this pink pen works. If it doesn't show up, I'll change it, but I think it's okay. So I'm going to come in along here. Oh no, it's not bold enough. I think I'm going to need a different colour. I think only just seeing that, so I think I'm going to change to a different colour. That pink is not quite working, so I'm just going to reach to my pen box and see what I can grab. I have got a variety of pen nibs and sizes, so which is quite useful. And I appreciate you might not have quite the vast selection of pens that I tend to have accumulated over the years. So I've got these ones that are like a sort of brush tip felt pen, so you get like a thicker and thinner line by adding more pressure. But that's better. I think that red along there, just coming along that swirl, just following that along up into there, and I'm going to continue that. I can see it just appearing in that section around there, and then I think maybe a little bit can come along this edge here. Again, just looking for where I've got the strongest brush marks. Have I got any up in here? Yeah, I think I can just take that one in there. So it's just looking to see where you can find those. I think this edge here, again, although it's not perfectly straight, I'm going to take this one through here and maybe a little bit into this edge here. And this one is it's a really wobbly edge, feathery edge, but I'm going to do it anyway because it's a really strong moment where these two are sort of very definitely separated. There we go. And just up into that edge. And it's quite nice because this is a thicker line. It's again a different kind of feel to the blue line. And I've just spotted, you find this, the more you look at something, the more you see in it. I've spotted this blue line now running through here, so I can add that into my stronger line. So I can take this line all just down this section here where it starts. And then there's a nice strong edge I can pick up on, coming down into that area. That's it, and across here like that. And I think I'm going to count this one too, because as you sort of come on, you think, oh, I do want to find more, and you can maybe sort of, as it were, be more generous on your joining criteria, you know, let more people into the club. So I'm going to take this edge along here as well and define this edge a bit more, maybe even all the way up round here. So we're sort of just starting to see some of these layers coming, and we're getting this feeling of things rolling on top of other things, and obviously spiraling, which is what we're trying to play with, is this whole spiraling sensation. And then you have to ask people, are we spiraling up or spiraling down? And I don't think both have benefits, though spiraling down feels more negative, but I don't think it necessarily is. And then I'm just found an edge there, so I'm going to take that edge along. And it's actually quite a subtle edge, but I can see it, an edge kind of coming along here as well. And then maybe into this nice sort of frillier bit kind of coming through there. So we're starting to see some more kind of structures that are happening here. I want to get this inside curl as well. So I'm going to do that in blue, kind of like going alongside. I know I've got a red line here, but I'm going to do it in the purple, kind of coming along behind that, sort of making this one stronger, and just following that sort of smokiness. Then it's going to hit the red line and it's going to turn into the red line, so it's kind of travelling around in a different kind of way. Right, okay, so that's kind of a good, that's given me lots of layers to think about and to play with. I want to try and get a feeling of spokes maybe, or things kind of like coming out from a central spiral, in the way that you get that sort of like segment feel of snail shells or ammonite fossils, which is kind of what I'm thinking about. But at the moment I'm just sort of like warming up to where to do it. So I'm building up to the one. I'm going to slightly backtrack and just get a bit more shape into this spiral up here. So you might, but if there's a spiral you can see that's maybe quite soft, you might want to bring that out a bit more. You might want to, like, I'm just going to add a little bit extra into here, look, where I've got that sort of strong edge, and you know, bring that kind of round. Okay, so how am I going to get some spiral spokes into here? Well, we're just going to try something, and ultimately, you know, if it really doesn't work, then as I always said, well, you know, it's just a painting, so it's, you know, we can live with it. So I'm going to bring some spoke lines coming out into this sort of space off this harder line. Where this soft bit comes, I'm going to kind of imagine it's sort of obscuring what's going on. So then I'm going to take these spokes growing out of this spiral, and if we give them just a slight curl or curve, I suppose, so they're sort of more like well, curved rather than straight. I'm running out of words there. I do mean curved. So it just helps to give that section again a feeling of curvedness in the way that snail shells are kind of spiraled around that way. And you just have to keep deciding where you want them to go. You know, are you going to have them coming out or going under areas that are here? So if you want to make them go under, start your line out, then just lift your pen off the paper so it's not making a mark. Carry the arc on and put it down, your pen down where you want it to come through, and you can see that kind of, that sort of leads the line, you carries it on for your eye, so your eye kind of then makes the jump between the two. So let's bring another one, and of course as you come out, as the spiral's getting bigger, your lines are going to get bigger because they'll be describing bigger sort of areas of spiral. So let's just bring some more of these round. So I've got some sections happening here, maybe just a few kind of in here. Bring that round. Well, I think that's, you know, that's somewhere to start. That gives us something to build on. I think I'm going to take, where I've got this spiral here, I'm going to take this with the pen, I'm going to draw it so it's going smaller. So obviously I won't see it because I don't want it to go on top of this orange. So I'm going to mime draw it until it hits the blue background, and then it's going to come round and lift up and down, and then it would keep on going. I think most of that's going to be hidden behind that shape, but I've got to continue my segments, as it were, coming round. So I'm just segmenting that round where I think I'd see them, probably some in here and in here as well. So hopefully that's kind of got this feeling of a spiral kind of shell hidden inside this sort of spiral illusion. I've got another one up here that I think I can do something similar with. So again, this time I'm going to define that spiral with my pen. So I can see that here, and they go infinitely tiny, so it depends how tiny you feel like drawing. And then again, the spiral bumps are going to come out from here. So this bit is going to be quite defined. You're going to see those spirals, but as they come round, they get bigger and they're going to disappear into the cloudiness at some point, because I'm sort of imagining all these sort of fossilized shapes in this kind of crystal. So it's kind of, they're half there, and so I imagine it's coming around here, and then they're going to reappear on this side and kind of build round. So it's just all these ideas of things being in the rock and sort of gradually being eroded and changed over time. So I can just bring some of these lines through into this area. Oh, I'm going to hit this one here, so I'm just going to keep, there's a painted line I can see here, so I'm going to follow that line until it kind of disappears out into about there. So I've got, again, half sort of like imagined sort of spiral happening somewhere around there. And again, yours are all going to look different, and you can decide on different areas and different parts that you might want to bring in. I've got this sort of like, what I'm thinking was a kind of ghost spiral kind of like appearing here. So I'm going to work around that at the moment and think about it. So I'd like to add some detail into some of these. So I'm thinking I'm going to use my pen. I'm going to use the good old circles that, and what I'm going to do is do a piece on this bit because it's quite big, because I want to do it on here as well, but that's quite small. So you can get the idea, I'm going to start off with the sort of larger section. So I'm going to start with following the spiral shape with circles like that, just sort of building them up, and then I want them to follow the curved lines that I've drawn, but as they come up to the middle, they're going to kind of disappear off into kind of nothingness and sort of dots. So there's more kind of like round there. If I'll do, I think I'll just zoom in a bit closer so we can definitely see how this pattern is developing. Go on camera, go closer. I think that's as close as we're going to get. But that's a bit closer there, so you can see them all sort of like clustering. And again, I'm going to bring them up here because you remember how I always boringly and relentlessly say that the more pen you put on, the darker the effect is going to be, because it's like you're just putting more pen, less paint showing through, more darkness. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to cluster these sort of circles, and hopefully that's starting to add to that curved feeling. So when it comes on this side, this is my line that I'm coming through, I'm going to just continue with tiny circles, and then as I come towards the other side, they're going to be bigger because they're going to add more weight to that shape visually. So I'm going to come back and I can add more sort of detail into those. I can add more colour. And then again, this one, as they come across, they're going to get bigger until they're following that sort of red edge there. So they're sort of like clustering, and that's starting to give that sort of enhancing that shape. I'll do this space under here because hopefully if I do another one, you can see how that kind of adds to the feel of the shape, kind of moving in between. So as they come to the edge, I want more of them, I want biggers of them. Biggers of them, that's a word. I want them to be biggery, and then cluster. And I'm going to come in and, you know, we can put some extra darker ones. You can grab, if you've got a chunkier pen, you can grab one, and I'm trying to find one that isn't grey. Well, I picked up 3 pens, all of them are grey. I want a bluey one. Come here, bluey pen. There we go. So I've got this one that has a chunkier end, so I can come in and, you know, we can darken down those circles and make them stronger and cluster them in, like some of them in. So as they come around the edge, and we can sort of dot them through as well to kind of bring that. So we're getting this sort of, hopefully, this kind of shape. So as they come in here, let's see what it's like if we draw them. We can draw them in the larger pen first as well. So some of them can come in larger, and then as they become more, as they move out, they can become more hollow. We might quite like that feel, so maybe we'll keep going with that because we're starting to get that feel of, and then as it comes this side, they've got to cluster a bit bigger and get larger, so that we're sort of getting, let's get some bigger ones into this side as well. So hopefully we're going with these lines, we're finding movement and the kind of pattern that we've created kind of into here, and so we're really sort of hopefully seeing this sort of snail shape starting to appear. So I've got this sort of dark edge of paint here, so I'm tempted to kind of bring some quite strong circles into that edge. So let's build up on that and move our way around. So that's making that quite definite and quite part of that. Let's be it quite well. And we can come back and we can do the highlighting thing that we've done before on this to kind of really give that a lovely sort of like jewel-like quality. And there's quite a strong edge here of my spiral. So let's build that in, make it stronger. And then we can keep working our way around and using sort of different size pens to create different sort of dots. So really it is circle, but it's sort of dotting as well. It's starting to build up, starting to break the surface up into texture like that just by using the pen mark. So let's take, there's another branch I can see kind of coming up here, so let's follow that. So again, bring it down into almost just dots in the kind of middle of the art, and then as you come back up following that line, then the circles can get bigger and darker and cluster them all round. And same here, I want some on this side. So each side we're trying to sort of build up a segment. So these lines, maybe we can get these lines, I think they can come bolder and darker now, so we can bring those in, and then we can soften them again by sort of drawing in our circle shapes. And hopefully we're starting to see that as being like quite definite surface and texture and pattern, and that's sort of looking quite exciting. And this would be quite a good one, you know, if you wanted to add some gold detailing. And I think I'm feeling this is becoming quite sort of ornate and and encrusted, that's the word I'm thinking of. And so that could definitely, we could definitely take some gold and silver pen in here, I think, to sort of add to that very bejeweled kind of feel. So let's continue. So here we go, smaller. Let's just make those divisions stronger now, because I'm liking that effect. Bring those in, and again, bigger circles, and cluster them around. So we're leaving almost like a sort of, if you think about it, as we take the corners off of this sort of shape each time, we're almost leaving like a circular space, or in the larger sections it's an elongated sort of oval space, but we're sort of leaving almost like a circular space in the middle, and that of course becomes a bit like a highlight. So it sort of enhances that feeling of form, and it gives it kind of shadow and shape, even though we don't quite know what it is we're drawing. We just know that we're drawing something, and we're following these lines that we've given ourselves to kind of build up. And then we're seeing a sort of very, I really like this combination, the very soft ghost whirls of paint, and then this much stronger kind of defined pen line. I think it's really interesting to have these two surfaces working together. So let's bring these lines through. There we go, and then lovely circles clustering in and leaving that little bit of pale blue. And we can go back and use other colours to kind of enhance this effect. So if I just finish this little section in here, and then I'll try and grab a paler blue pen and see what I mean. If you don't have a significantly paler pen, or the range of colours, if you start doing hollow circles rather than filled in ones, it will have the same kind of effect as I'm going to show now, because it will, again, it's my thing that I've just said about putting, you know, if you want to keep something lighter, put less pen, and if you want to make something darker, put more pen. So if I go for, I'll do it in thin pen so you can see the difference. So as you come up here, if you then start adding in some hollow circles, it's putting a bit of texture and a colour in, but it's letting more of the paint kind of surface show through. And that helps to kind of graduate this into a sort of so if you imagine the dark blue pen is like my dark tone, and then I want something that's like a midway tone before I hit the paint area, which is my lighter tone. So if you use the same pen, you can do circular shapes but allow more of the paper to show through, and that starts to give that strength. If you've got a bigger range of pens, so like if I grab a pale bluish pen, because I'm lucky enough to have one, I can then come in and, like I've done the dark blue, I can turn those into mid blue, and that's starting to hopefully blend a bit into the dark blue, and you can see that it's sort of like it's helping that sense that this is a shape that's got a big curl to it, because, or big curve to it rather, not a curl. I keep saying curl when what I mean is curve, but it's got a curve to it because it's sort of the mid-tone makes it look like, if you imagine anything that's curved, we only see that it's curved because of the way the shadow falls. So it tends to have shadow at the edges and then a highlight in the middle, and that's sort of what makes it curved. So by grading the colours like this, it sort of helps to give that feel. I'm still leaving the kind of ghosty section nice and smooth, nice and unadulterated and left alone, because I want to have that contrast between the two. But I'm going to keep building up, and there's nothing to stop you to sort of get that gradation quite subtle. There's nothing to stop you going back in amongst with some of the dark blue and you know, coming around, and so you've got like half dark blue and half light blue, because that kind of is a halfway house between the two, and you can sort of build up that kind of feel. So hopefully now sort of underneath ammonite is getting really ornate looking, and it's got a lovely surface texture, and I can just put some little, again, sort of dots in between of the dark blue to kind of blend that transition point between the two, kind of coming around like that. So it's just mixing the two together really, and gradually adding more pale blue elements and compared to the dark blue elements, and that will start to tone your piece so that we're getting this kind of bumpy feel. And with this one, I'm going to have areas of like really intense surface like this, contrasting with these very soft, kind of dreamy, floaty areas. So there's a definite difference between the two. So you don't have to worry. You're not going to, unless you want to, do every single spiral like this. And trust me, I'm not going to tell you how you spend your time. So if that's what you want to do, it would look amazing and I'd love to see it. However, you can also get away with just picking areas to put really intense surface pattern on like this, and then leave, and then you've got a lovely contrast with the bits where it's much more softer, and it works really well. It's, you know, it, as long as, like with all these things, I sort of feel, you know, if you make a definite decision about something while you're doing it, then it will always work better than if you kind of are not quite sure. So if you say, right, I'm going to pick these areas and these are going to be really intense, it will work beautifully in contrast. And then where you sort of like, what I've done here is where I've got the pale paint and I just want to kind of break into that, I've just put tiny dots of the blue onto that pale surface. So that's again like another tonal breakdown, and then hopefully you're starting to see that's giving that a really nice transition from the dark blue into the light blue into the painted background, which is my palest colour. And of course, if I want to go even further and kind of almost create like a highlight effect, this is when we can use our white paint pen, because in that very pale section just in the middle there I can cluster some dots in, and hopefully that's going to start looking a little bit like a highlight. It's making me think of crustacea. Well, I know I'm thinking of ammonites and things as well anyway, but it's sort of starting to have this almost like sea creature kind of feel to it. If I just shade that a bit with my hand, you can see that white highlight comes in, and that just helps to just give that the feeling of that sort of curling up. And you might want to come and put a couple of white dots in, as if you're getting a little bit of scattered highlight into that, some of those dark sections. That can look quite cool. So let's move on to the next section and get that in, because I want to kind of build this up. I want to try and get at least all the bits in here done so you can really see that effect. So let's go into the blue pen again, just to sort of build these up. I can do it on a small scale here in these little sections again, and they should build up quite quickly because they're smaller. So I'm just going to put some blue in and then dots into the middle, and I can do the next one. Then I'm going to come back and put some white in. So let's get some, again, some, and as you come towards the middle of each section, your dots should be getting smaller, so that you can get that light effect. And I must admit I'm working quite quickly because I want you to see the effect. So don't worry if you can't quite keep up, because I am going super fast. And if you've not done this before, then it's going to be a bit hard to, you know, to literally go pace. But I just want you to try and get the feeling. I think you'll see kind of the effect that we're getting if I get all these little bits in quite quickly. So I do on the very small sections. I don't really have space to do any dots. I'm almost just kind of outlining them in blue, so that blue colour is coming in. And then if I grab my white pen and I can just put a little tiny dot of white in the middle, and see that's just start to look like highlights again in here. So again, there's going to put a few dots in here and in this section, and that's sort of hopefully starting to get that feeling that you can almost reach out and touch those. This row of bumps I've got in here, I mean, they are calling out for a highlight, aren't they? I think we've seen in all our pieces from the last week how effective those little white highlights are. So those little circles, because they've got nice dark backgrounds, that's, you know, I think it works really nicely to bring a highlight into all the way coming round, and that starts to add to this three-dimensional effect, and it's such a nice contrast with that much more smooth section. Right, okay, so I'm hoping you can sort of really see how this is developing. I want to do this little bit in here because at the moment you can see how, because this is unfinished, this bit, it looks really weird in comparison to here. So let's come in, and it doesn't take much, just a little bit of blue. If you end up kind of doing all the shape, when they're really small, you're almost going to have to do all of the shape in blue, in the sort of mid-tone colour, or whatever colour. You might be doing it in greens, you might be more in the purples. And again, if you only need to have maybe 2 or 3 colours, and you can always overlap them together to get different tonals. So, you know, by doing some dots over the top of each other, and you can kind of blend the two kind of colour areas together. So you don't have to have a set of 5,000 colours. I don't think I actually have 5,000 colours, I should point out. I've just exaggerated that, but I have quite a few. But, you know, even a set of most pens will have 2 shades of blue, and that's really all you need. And if you want to make your blue darker, you can add some purple into the blue section or some black, and that will really make it darker and stronger. So you can see then that sort of, and I've got this sort of soft cloud now, kind of, it's a bit sort of like a mist going across. Now, if you're being really, you know, adventurous and you want to go for this as an idea, I don't know if I'm going to pull it up, but you could slightly follow this shape into this soft area, but in really soft, delicate colours, and then it would sort of look like you're seeing that sort of shape below through a kind of frosted glass. But that may be beyond us for a Thursday night when we've all had a long week at work, so it's something to think about. But I'm just bringing some white dots in there because that just continues that round, that sort of pattern shape like that there. But then we sort of want to get this bit in here, don't we, and this sort of section in here, because I haven't finished that through there. So again, this one I think I can put a few more dark dots in. I've got some blue dots here, so you put some blue, and then I'm going to put some darker, but you know, they're not going to be as close together. If I spread them out a bit more, then they're not as strong, so they're acting a kind of halfway house between the two kind of tonal barriers, and they're smaller. So it just sort of helps to graduate your colour change between the two. Look, I can come back through here, look, and I've put some, again, just sort of some dot section in amongst, tiny dots in amongst that blue section. It just helps to kind of blend these in. So there's lots of scope of blending these two colours without actually having to colour them all in. So let's put some, then I can come back in with my pale blue, and again I'm dotting it in rather than doing complete circles so that I'm getting some of the background showing through. So again, that sort of breaks it down more subtly. Yeah, subtly is a word, isn't it? Yes, it's a more subtle approach. And it reminds me very much of blue lobsters, who have this fantastic coloured shell. And they're quite rare, blue lobsters. You only get one in a 1,000, but they are absolutely brilliant, like sapphire blue. And I don't eat lobsters because I discovered that if you don't eat lobster, they will actually live forever. There is no, if nothing comes to eat them, then they don't actually ever die. And apparently they can, you can tell how old a lobster is by counting the lines on its shell in a particular place. And you don't often see giant lobsters, but if you see a giant lobster, and they got one in captivity, and they worked out he was 280 years old. And I thought, gosh, that means that lobster was in the sea when Napoleon was around. And I thought, I think that's amazing. And I thought, I don't feel I can eat something that, you know, can boast such longevity. It seems very unfair to be the person that ends that winning streak. So, I mean, I don't think he had a lot to do with Napoleonic politics, but, you know, I still think it's amazing that a lobster can live that long. And I do like blue lobsters. I had to do in my MA, one of my illustration projects was, we had listened to a piece of music and illustrate a story around it. And the piece of music I had was the Lobster Dance. It was a piece of folk music on the violin. It was very delightful. And I did this lovely drawing of a blue lobster who winning the lobster dance competition, and all the other orange lobsters, you know, accepting him for his blueness, and he wins the dance and gets to marry the lobster princess. So I had loads of fun drawing loads of different lobsters. But yeah, so this surface, because I found some lobster shells on the beach and took them home to draw. This surface, after a while looking, they really looked like they'd been painted with a set of felt tip pens. They looked like they had all these lovely dots of different felt tip pen on them, and it was just such a fantastic surface to draw. So that is why I'm rabbiting on about lobsters in the middle of an art class, but it does have this feeling to me, I think that's, you know, it's relevant because we're using these kind of snail shapes, and those are all kind of underwater creatures, and so I'm hoping that it's sort of given you the feel of what we're trying to do with these sort of spirals. So we're not saying this is a drawing of some giant snails, but it's just got this lovely kind of feeling of these sort of ammonites trapped in rock. And if you've ever found an ammonite fossil, it is something, when you do find them sometimes on beaches and things, it is really quite magical finding a fossil, because it's just, you know, this little tiny creature, or the impression of this creature that lived so long ago. It's quite mind-boggling. And ammonites are particularly beautiful. And I've seen some lovely ones. I never found ones like this, but I found seen some beautiful ones that had become transformed into crystals. So they were sort of ammonites and also amethysts, and just absolutely stunning. But as ever, I digress. So there we go. So that's just, and again, for this one, I want to bring in a little bit of the white highlights. And so I'm hoping we're sort of seeing this texture and this surface and this sort of moving in and out. Because I've got these, we've done this row of circles in here with the white highlights in our sort of strong area. And I've got another bit of sort of strong paint coming through here. I think I'm going to continue that again and draw some circles coming across here following this sort of spiral. Because as I've said already, if you give the same treatment to related parts of your image, so we're saying wherever we've drawn this hard image, we're going to draw, we've found a nice hard line, we're going to fill that with circles and give it highlights. You'll see how it starts to link the areas of an image together, because your eye tends to do that. It tends to flit across an unfamiliar image like this and find a way of connecting it. So if we have these sort of areas doing the same or given the same treatment, even if they're not looking identical, it kind of helps to give the eye of your viewer something to kind of step across the image with. So I'm just going to come back a little bit. I'm going to put the circles in to this spiral here, so you can kind of see how that will really start to link these pieces together, and we sort of like the viewer is then rewarded almost, because we love, as human beings, as animals as we are, we love seeing patterns. Patterns are one of the things that separate us from other mammals, and our love of finding links and patterns. I won't go into it now, but I could give a whole lecture on how amazing our pattern seeking and understanding ability is. So you can see how just before I even put the highlights in, now your eye is like linking across all these sections, and what appears like to be quite a random composition suddenly sort of starts developing a rhythm that we find pleasing, because you can find these moments. It's like finding the clues, you know, in a whodunit. You know, you sort of start finding the links, and you know, we love to find these sort of patterns, both artistically and sort of intellectually. It's sort of something that we're really good at, and so I think that's why knowing that allows us to kind of get our viewer to engage into a piece like this, and ourselves really, because it gives us something to work to. So I'm just going to do some circles into this one too, and then I'll put the highlights in. Then we're really going to get the feeling of the way these areas kind of join together, and you really get this lovely feeling of things, I say, these sort of clouds of softness, and then these sort of being rolled back to show all these glorious details. Which pops into my head as a wonderful line from The Tempest by Shakespeare, which I am not going to try and do because I don't remember it exactly, but it's something about whether the character Caliban, who's a kind of half man, half monster, you know, talks about the magical things he finds in the island where the Tempest play takes place. He talks about how the clouds part and wonderful visions sort of like of sparkling beauty come to him through the sort of clouds, and I kind of got this feeling here. It's making me think of that sense of the clouds parting to reveal something, or if you've ever had a sort of, you know, poke around in a rock pool with kids or something, and then suddenly you see something like a wonderful sea anemone opening up, and you realise this perfect little world in a rock pool. It's got that kind of feeling to it. You can tell I live by the beach. I spend a lot of time poking around on beaches. It's one of my favourite activities. So let's just keep but you can see how as I start building these highlights up, look at how these lovely patterns are starting to link together, and your eye can kind of whiz around them and find the connections. And because we've got this, we did this spiral, and then we kind of like blotted bits of it out, but it's a bit like the effect that I say, if you want a line to continue to give the impression of perspective, you kind of start a line, then lift your pen up and then draw it invisibly and then put it down again. This has that kind of feel because you can see where the line has gone, and imagine the pen lifting up and carrying on and then carrying round. So you've got this sort of feel, and you know, there's not really anything here at all, but there's a tiny bit of paint, but you don't really see it. But you know, your eye will continue that journey round and it will find the pattern, just as, you know, with perspective, when we look at something from afar, we don't assume that it's small. We assume that it will get bigger as it gets closest to us, or something is something in front of something. We don't assume that that thing has got a hole in it. We assume there's something in front of it, because that's how we see the world. But I think this is starting to look really, these sort of like almost like bead necklaces or sort of pearl necklaces lacing the image together, I think is starting to become really effective. So that's working really nicely. I think it's one last little bit here to bring the highlights in. And again, when they've got a dark background, those highlights really kind of sing out. You can see how that's sort of then giving your eye, taking you around that spiral. So let's get a bit more of our lobster texture. It's going to become a lobster texture in my mind. So into these sort of spiral areas here. So around in this sort of one, I think, I'm going to put a bit more dark blue in before I get the mid blue pen. I just want to soften. So if you imagine, that's the kind of shape that I want to work towards. So I'm going to get my darker blue into that, against that nice misty zone there. And bring those through. And again on this side, just sort of darken those down. And then I can start blending in some of my mid-tone blue. Just coming in round here. So this is all one piece. It's just got the orange piece on top. So just be aware, if I've got a piece like that, I'm just going to be aware of, trying to see the shape edge that I want in the piece as a whole, ignoring this floating orange section kind of coming across. And I can bring my dots round, and here we go. Let's build these up. I'm going to take all this bit into sort of blue, so my highlight's going to be slightly pushed up into this section here, and then I'm going to bring them out, sort of dot them round. I'm going to mix a bit more of that mid blue into that dark section so that I can get that blend to work a bit more smoothly. And there we go, just sort of blend those sort of in a little bit more into that area, and then I can bring my white highlights in. And it's almost like, it sort of almost starts to have this sort of dotting effect. It almost looks a bit ripply, doesn't it? Like when you see something through that sort of bobbled glass that you get in, obscured glass that you get in doorways and bathroom windows and stuff, which makes everything go. It's got a sort of slightly rippled quality as well, or like sort of as if the surface is slightly moving, like sunlight sparkling on the water kind of feel, which I think is really, again, just, so much fun just building up a surface like this. And I just love this sort of combination between the two. So so the next section along, I want to, again, plenty of dark circles along this edge on this side. You can just kind of work your way around, seeing each sort of snaily section and exploring it and getting it to the shape you want. And because you're building it up gently, you can sort of say, oh, well, do I want to put more of a curve? Yes, I'm getting too much of a corner here, so I'll put some dots in there to soften it. You don't have to get the shape exactly perfect. You can build it up gradually, bit by bit. And, it doesn't have to be perfect anyway, because nobody knows what you're doing except you. So you can just keep on adding in and sort of editing that shape until it's a shape that you like. And you can do small dots, then you can make the dots bigger if you need to, so as they come down towards that edge and up round here like that, just sort of dotting them through, and then take a few of the dark ones out into that space. So I'm creating each one, thinking like a little sort of mound like that. And then once I've got those ones in, then I go for the mid-tone, and I can blend some of those in. So down here, however big you do them, it's going to be fine, because you're really only going to see that blue in the spaces between the dark ones. And then once you've got the blue into those sort of areas, or your mid-tone, because you could be using greens, you could be using any colour, but your sort of mid-tone one, and then again you can start sort of dotting that, so we're letting some more of the background show through. And that's a way of creating this sort of slightly tonal gradient, softening through until you've got hardly any blues. And you can always go back down. You see, you can do some and you can go back and say, oh, well, actually, look, maybe here I'm thinking there's too much of a hard line there. So I can put some more blues in to just make that transition a bit smoother. And I can go in between that dark section of the dark spots with my mid-tone blue to kind of really blend and soften that in. And then when I'm happy with it, I can go in with my white pen and create my highlight area. And that's always going to be kind of in the middle. So start with a denser white in the middle with your dots, and then scatter your light, as it were, out a little bit further. So there we go. So that's sort of like how we're going to build all these sort of sections around. I'm not sure about this orange section at the moment. I can't decide whether to leave that alone or to go in and do something else with it. So that's usually a good indication to leave it alone until you've done everything else you can definitely think about. Because if you do everything else you're certainly sure about, and then you come back to look at this and you still can't think what to do with it, then probably the answer is don't do anything to it. It's fine as it is. At the moment, I'm going to leave that as a kind of, I'm not sure, and I'm going to try and get as much of this done as possible and then see what I feel about it. So I'm going to try and come in sort of in this area here so that I can sort of, again, see that near the orange and see if anything sparks me. But at the moment, I'm really quite happy with it. So I'm just going to probably leave it as it is because I think it's got a nice sort of sweep. But I mean, you could decide to make a second sort of, like a more lobster orange swirl on top with sort of segments. It could completely become a different kind of thing quite easily. So don't feel that if I end up not doing anything this, but don't feel that you either have or have to leave it alone. You can if you've got an equivalent bit in yours. This is a wonderful thing, and I hope number one the takeaway from all of these classes is thinking, ultimately with these, whatever you discover each time you do one is fantastic, and that's what you should go with. And you could do the same basic starting point 10 times over, and then each time you're not going to get the same result because of the lovely fluid quality of watercolours. And that's why it's so fantastic, because each one you'll get slightly different colours, you'll get different forms appearing, and they might suggest to you a different treatment each time you reach for your pens. And that's why I think I love working like this, and I love discovering these kind of patterns, because you never know what's going to happen. The journey is different every time. And realistically, everything is different every time, and that's what keeps it interesting. But, and it therefore also means if you get a particular starting point that you really enjoy, like you get a shape of paint or a kind of colour range that you like to work, you can just keep on revisiting it, and it's absolutely fine to do that and wonderful to do that, because the more you focus on something, it's like the way when you start seeing the first sort of paint, you often think, oh my goodness, I can't think of anything to do with this, and you go, well, I'll just do that because I can do that, and oh well, I'll just do that bit, and then before you know where you are, you're 5 hours in and you've done loads. And that's because you can never stop looking at something, you can never stop exploring and being curious and finding out these different shapes and ideas where you can take things, because that's what creativity is all about, is it gives you this way of exploring. And I always have to remember that Matisse, the very famous French impressionist, spent something like 20 years painting pictures of the same mountain, Mont Saint-Victoire, because he could never, he felt he was never done with it. He could, every morning he woke up and because he was obviously privileged and lucky enough to live in a beautiful part of France and to be a great artist, so he had that going for him. But every time he woke up and he saw this mountain out of his window, and every day it looked beautiful and it looked different, and he saw different colours in it, and he saw different shapes that he wanted to capture, and he never got tired of looking at it. And I think it's surprising how even the most mundane things, if you see them with a creative eye and a creative potential, you can always find something that draws you back to them. And there is a subject that if you just want to keep on doing all the time, don't worry about it. Absolutely follow your passion. So I'm hoping that all the different sort of starting points that I've given you over these series, that one or two of them will have really struck a chord with you and you want to go back and do them again. And please do, because you'll find something different that you didn't find the first time round. And then if you do it again, you'll find something different again. And it might just be you change the colour group and, you know, and see how that works for you. You might give yourself a whole different set of shapes to build into it. And that's the wonderful thing about it. That's what I hope you can get from it, that, you know, it's not, as the old song says, it's not where you start, it's where you finish that matters. And I would add in how you get there. So what I'm doing now is I'm just sort of trying to get all the dark tones in, sort of generally over all these kind of areas. And this is, as I said, I think before, if I was doing this not in a class situation where there's a time restraint, if I was just, I mean, there's always a time restraint in life. I so rarely have the luxury of just doing one of these, but, you know, I sort of save it for Christmas when I think, you know, other people have a Christmas jigsaw. I have a big one of these that I do. And, you know, because, you know, obviously as someone who draws for a living, there's nothing like relaxing from drawing, a hard day drawing, by spending an evening drawing. But what I'm doing here is I'm going to put all my dark sort of areas in first, because that's starting to give me the shape so I can see where I'm working. And if I was doing this all on my own, I would kind of have a tendency to do this, to kind of do all the dark sort of, or one shadow or one technique or one pattern across the whole surface, and kind of see where that takes me. But in the classes I tend to kind of go through the stages back and forth, because I want you to be able to see where they would end up, as I know we won't have time necessarily to finish them in one session. So what you can see is that sort of starts to give you that sort of overall shape. With this edge here where it's quite soft down here, I think I'm probably going to almost just let that fade into the blue. So I'm going to keep, instead of doing a whole segment in these sections, I'm going to keep my shading almost like a sort of half moon just in that top half, because I don't want to sort of crash into this beautiful paint down here. So I'm going to keep this sort of more to these stronger areas where I've definitely got my marks and I know what I'm doing. So again, I'm just going to bring my blues along here. I wouldn't say that, it doesn't mean that I once I do this I'll never pick up the blue pen again, but, you know, you have to sort of make a judgment and decide if you need to go back and add bits in. That's always fine, but I try and kind of get all of one stage or one level of marks done and then see where that's taken me, because sometimes this opens up, you know, getting one stage done opens up an idea which you might not have had at the beginning, you know, somewhere that you might want to take it that hadn't occurred to you when you started, because as I said, this is very sort of reflective and organic process. We don't, I mean, I literally didn't know what we were going to do tonight until about sort of, you know, I didn't know where I was going to take this. I had an image in my head and it certainly wasn't this. So, you know, it's sort of where I was started, but it's also completely different. So once I've got that sort of dark blue colour in, I can come in again with the mid-tone in the same way and start getting that in. And I'm going to switch to a slightly chunky end of my pen just to speed up the process, because I really want to try and I've got about 5 minutes to go, so I'm going into sort of slightly overdrive here. I would probably spend a lot more time, doing this, and I would get my blend to work, but I think if I can just get this sort of mid-tone in, so you get a sense of how these segments are working and how they're kind of going round, how they're sort of creating that surface that we've built on top of our paint. So we've got this sense of ridges and domes and spirals. I'm hoping we'll get this in and do a bit of white, then we'll sort of get that feeling coming through. And you'll see where you can take this, and then you can decide for yourselves what you do with the equivalent of the red section up there. I'm still tempted at the moment. I think I'm still going to leave it and just let it be a sort of lovely red, soft, reddy orange contrast to these areas, but then I might change my mind later. It's always a good idea, if you really aren't sure with a bit, you know, put it at one side, sleep on it, put it aside, come and look at it fresh eyes in the morning and see what it's saying to you then, because sometimes these things need time to bed in. You know, you can get very close to an artwork and you can't, it's the wood for the trees, you can't quite see where to go because you've been looking at it for so long. So if you give yourself a break and come back to it from a distance, then it can help you decide how you're going to finish it, where you're going to go with it. So I'm just bringing the sort of the mid-tones here. I would probably soften a bit more out into here. I say I'm being a bit speedy, just trying to get this overall feeling so we can get this feeling of this quite three-dimensional shape underneath all this mistiness. And again, just a little bit of in here, and then I'm just going to put some, it's all right, just a big jump then because something decided to fall off my workbench and I'm so focused on what I'm doing. It scared the life out of me and made me do a jump. So it's good I didn't just put a great big line through that because I nearly did. But it's not as bad as when the cat jumps on the piano keys, which he does from time to time. And that is a real sort of like horror movie moment when I've been focusing on something. And there we go. And that's got that in. And then I can just put in some highlights so we can get that sort of feel. Just a nice scatter. Here we go, just adding, and then here on these ones where I've got this curve, I'm just going to again cluster them towards the top of that shape so that they're just bringing the highlight into there, into that section. Just out into here. And a little bit of highlight in there, and I'm hoping that that just gives you the feeling of that kind of effect. If you pull the camera out a bit so we can see kind of where we're going, we've got this sort of, and again hopefully I would get this smaller one in as well at the top. Let me just tilt that up a bit so you can see it. No, it's not going to tilt up, go on, that's it. Well anyway, there's a little one up here and I would try and get the same technique done on that one, so I've got this sort of cluster of sort of like ammonites underneath their crystalline kind of structure in between. And I think looking at it, I might do something with the red one. I think I might maybe sort of break that up into segments as well and kind of get going. But that would definitely be for another session because I think we are pretty much at our time now. So there we go. So that is my mystical ammonites underway. There we go.